Welcome to Sense of Style. I'm Stuart. 8 fragrances that are works of art, and I happen to believe that collecting fragrances are no different than collecting paintings or collecting vintage records. I believe this is an art form. It's an often overlooked art form. I feel very lucky that it's overlooked because I get an advantage. But there's a difference between calling something a work of art that you would find at your local art fair made by your grandma and something that you would see in a museum by a great master. I am not talking today about just any old fragrances. I'm talking about something that you would find in an art gallery in the Louvre or the d'Orsay, something like that. I'm talking about super high quality, super creative masterworks that are genuinely, I believe, works of art. Fragrance number 1, this is Farenheit Le Parfum. And while I do happen to believe the original Farenheit, with the gasoline smell that some people get from it, with the mixture of leather, violet leaf, and nutmeg, I happen to believe this is a work of art. But I would say 20% of people hate this. And then another 20%, yeah, they don't really like it that much. So this is not super popular, even though it is a work of art. But this managed to appeal to people that like this. There's a fair chunk of the original in here. But this also appeals to people who can't stand the original. And it was just crafted so beautifully. It added a lot of vanilla. And that was 10 years ago. So I think in terms of what it added to the original Farenheit was kind of ahead of its time in some respects, because this fits in perfectly with the trend towards heavy vanilla in modern fragrances. This also has licorice and rum. I mean, it's absolutely gorgeous. It is stronger than the original, although, you know, it's supposed to be. It is a parfum. It was one of the hardest things that I can imagine doing is turning Farenheit, something that someone think smells toxic, into a gourmand, something that we're supposed to eat. And Francois Demachy did it. So next up, I had 2 decants of Serge Lutens fragrances. This one is Serge, and this one is 5 o'clock Eau Gingembre. And so I was kind of curious. I wanted to get a Serge Lutens fragrance, and I didn't know which one to get, and I eventually settled on Serge. I got a bottle of it. It's super powerful, and it's a really, really good, solid sweet tobacco. However, this is so creative and so different. And I mean, I have other sweet tobaccos. I don't have anything that smells remotely close to this, because this smells like gingerbread. And if you're thinking, I'm a guy, I don't want to smell like gingerbread, I think 90% of guys would have no problem. It is not a feminine thing about it, really. It is just a gorgeous, warm-smelling gingerbread fragrance. A lot of fragrances are getting super sweet these days. I think this is less sweet than some of the stuff that we're wearing. And the weird thing about this one is they did it, and they didn't even put ginger in it. There's no ginger in this fragrance that smells like gingerbread. It's a combination of tea and honey, a little bit of cacao and cinnamon. Somehow it ended up smelling like gingerbread. It's got really good performance. It doesn't smell like anything else in my collection. I talked about this one a lot, but I haven't emphasized what a real work of art I think this is. And I think at the end of the day, I think I bought the wrong fragrance. Next up, we have Old Spice. On D-Day, which is less than a month ago, the celebration of it, on D-Day, this would have been 6 years old. And guaranteed, some of those men on D-Day would have been wearing Old Spice. And yet, when I go to my local Walmart, any Walmart I go to in Southern Ontario, there is a bottle of Old Spice. So if you're a young guy, you're thinking, oh, well, that makes sense because all the old guys are wearing it. Bear in mind, though, let's say you're 24 years old in 1938. If you were that person, you would be 110. So you're long gone. This actually is not made for those people that are still buying it. This is a generational fragrance that's been passed down. It is a classic, weird, a little weird, cinnamon and floral fragrance. Carnation is a spicy floral. The spice was ramped up with cinnamon. It's a little bit powdery. Look, I understand if you don't want to smell dated, that's fine, but don't overlook it. Next up, we have YSL's M7 Oud Absolu, and this had to be a masterpiece. So in 2002, Tom Ford was the creative director of Yves Saint Laurent. Tom Ford was very innovative. He turned Gucci around. He wanted to bring Oud to the modern world. Oud had been a staple in the Middle East for over a millennia, and yet it was almost completely unknown in the West. There are a couple of niche fragrances that are very sort of obscure that had a little bit of Oud in it. He wanted to bring it to the masses, and so he went to Alberto Marias, who said, "Hey, Alberto, we're going to bring M7 to the masses. It's going to have Oud in it. It's got to be good." And then they brought in, now this is the modernized version of M7. This is Oud Absolu. It's toned down a little bit, but the core of the fragrance is still in this. This is a very seductive fragrance in its own way. It's made a little bit differently. There is not any rose or saffron in it. So that's what I call the dirty Oud. Those things balance it out a little bit, but it does have orange, which is a really nice complement. It's kind of different. It has a lot of myrrh. It has orange, myrrh, and then it has a little bit of patchouli. It just works. It's really, really potent. So yeah, it projects like an absolute beast. I really do think this one is a work of art. Next up, we have Creed's Royal Oud. And the funny thing is that after the release of M7, it was so popular that every single fragrance house had to have a fragrance with Oud in it. This is Creed's version, except this is not really an Oud fragrance. It was just more for marketing. It's called Royal Oud. This is really more of a woody, musky fragrance. There's a lot of woods in here, sandalwood, cedar. There is Oud, but it's not an Oud fragrance. So yeah, there's a musky component. It comes from angelica, which is a musky herb. It comes from musk itself. And then there's a very strong green facet to this too. Galbanum, which is a plant often turned into a resin. So it's got a green facet with the galbanum. It's got a woody facet. It's got a musky facet. It just, you can tell I really like a fragrance, but I can't stop sniffing it. Something a little bit different. This is Givenchy Gentleman. This is not 1974. This was just called Givenchy Gentleman when it released. They have since added Givenchy Gentleman 1974. It has changed so much that the open that I get in this, which is the newer bottle, is gone. And this has an animalic opening that was meant to be in this, but over time, and this bottle, this is a vintage bottle from the 1980s. That opening is gone. You just get something that smells probably the nicest. I mean, it's only for half an hour that I get this. Yeah, it's probably the nicest smell I have. It's completely changed. So if people tell you, I've had this people tell me, oh yeah, fragrances go bad. Well, sometimes they do. Sometimes they kind of stay the same, and then sometimes they turn into magnificent works of art like this. Now, this is very similar to this in the dry down. So like after, I would say, about 45 minutes, they're very, very similar. It's a very nice patchouli-based fragrance in the dry down, but the animalic component is gone. And yeah, so a little bit of a different story there, but good one. Next up, we have Ombre Leather by Tom Ford. I don't think anybody watching this video, I don't think there's a single person that's going to disagree with me that this is a work of art. Back when I started collecting, like really early on, I knew that not to buy things retail, but I didn't know enough to know that you couldn't get Chanel at the online discounter. So that's how early it was. I went to my local drugstore to buy Allure Homme Sport Eau Extreme. And I'd bought it. I'd sprayed a little on my hand, and I was browsing, and they had a sample of this, which was very odd, right? So I was pissed off at myself for even buying something retail. And then I smelled this, and I compared it to Allure Homme Sport, and I was like, ah, because this I mean, finally, we have Maison Margiela's by the Fireplace. Beast mode performance. Any fragrance that can smell, literally, through the use of gaiac wood and cloves, that can smell like something is burning. That's, I don't know. I just figured that's a really hard thing to do. It's a really innovative thing to do. Plus, I get 12 hours with this. I love Maison Margiela. I got really into it after I tried this. I know some guys think that it's too feminine. I don't happen to agree. I think it's a gorgeous fragrance. Anyway, I do believe this hobby is like collecting, you know, vintage records or really classy paintings. I think it's works of art, all of them. And these 8 are particularly good. Thanks for watching.